to Neighborhood Money, a video podcast that is here to grow your financial knowledge and help you build a life you deserve. I'm one of your co-hosts, Cavan, and I'm here with Andrew across the interwebs. Drew, I'm super excited to get this thing rolling today. What are you feeling?
Yep, I'm pretty excited. We're a little bit nervous, I'd have to say. The first episode pushing the personal finance neighborhood money podcast out, but I think we should jump into it and see where it takes us.
Yeah, I know we've been talking back and forth now for a few weeks and really excited to get this first episode in front of you guys and really interested in the topic that we have here today. So, our first episode, we're really going to be focusing in on the top 10 finance topics, specifically from an article from Investopedia. Personal finance really has a really broad definition and many definitions depending on who you're talking to. But generally speaking, personal finance is managing money, saving, and investing. But for Drew and myself, we each have different definitions of what personal finance actually means. So, Drew, what does personal finance mean to you?
Well, personal finance to me has kind of been a evolving thing as it's gone on. At this point in my life, I think some of the more important things to me has been trying to value my time a little bit over, a specific dollar amount. So I try to base a lot of my money decisions around if I have time for, family or friends or anything along those sorts. So I think personal finance for me is getting and knowing my money in a way where I'm flexible with saying, hey, if I have to move jobs, I can do that. If I get let go of a job or I decide to quit, I should be comfortable with, emergency funds and situations like that. I think another really big, important part of personal finance for me is not trying to be owned by your debt. I think there's so many times where you might want to keep up with the Joneses and
Exactly.
you find yourself with a lot of overwhelming debt, even though you think you can make those monthly payments.
Yeah,
Month to
buying
month,
stuff
it
that you
seems
don't
like it's
even want.
fine. But if the moment somebody decides to let you go or a washer breaks, or your water heater goes out, those payments aren't as easy to make up anymore. So I think just really knowing your finances, taking that inventory of where you're standing and just not being a slave to your debt.
Yeah, that's so true. Especially, so many people are buying things that they think they want, but after that initial high of purchasing it is over, they realize actually it's not something I really want. And they're really buying that because, you need to impress people. And it's really unfortunate that that's a reality for some people.
Yep. Yeah, I know there's times where I found myself thinking of that way and I know there's times where it's if you're looking for a new vehicle or looking for a house, you find yourself nitpicking and want the best of the best. But at the end of the day, you're living in something that's probably worse off than what you're looking for, and you're completely fine with that. And in the short term, it doesn't really matter. It's all about where the future is.
Yeah, I'm the same way with technology and electronics, man. I can go nuts with those. And you're like, do you really need to upgrade to the latest and greatest? So I totally get how people have those desires and wants. But yeah, so personal finance then for me is really just about choice. So being able to live a life that you really want to live and not be tied down to any type of job or any type of payment, like Drew was just saying, and really just being able to live that life that you really want to fulfill. Whether it's investing more so that down the road you can have a better retirement, or saving an extreme amount when you're younger to be able to maybe change jobs and maybe take a pay cut because the job that you thought you wanted, you no longer do. So that's a big thing for me when it comes to personal finance, is really setting yourself up to be able to make those choices. And then also being able to plan for the future. We all need to think about retirement or our later years in life, and really needing to understand that it takes quite a bit of money to retire and to live the retirement that I want ultimately. And so being able to put myself and my family in a position now to know that when that time comes, we will be in a good spot to live the life that we want at that point in time.
Definitely. And I think that's an important point is you can live the life that you want. I think there's a lot of times where you go to your 9 to 5, you put money in your retirement, and that's the only thing you think about. You work 40, 50 years, you retire, and you have a lot more extra time, but you're on such a fixed income that you might not be able to live the life that you initially set out or wanted to do at that retirement.
And then I have two children. Drew, you've got one on the way. And a big thing for me is really planning to leave a legacy for them when I'm no longer here. And so really being able to provide for my family and future generations the ability to be financially sound, as well as being able to help out any causes that I deem appropriate or interested in. And so I really think leaving that legacy is a big part of the personal finance journey for me. I'm super excited to move into this next topic around what are the top 10 personal finance topics and areas. And really starting off with number one is to devise a budget. And this is probably my favorite one because I think it is so important to your personal finance and your money journey as you think about how you manage your money and you can control the inflows and the outflows and making sure that they align up and you can continue to reach any goals that you've set forward. When we think about budgeting, it's kind of like the big bad word, right? Like people just don't want to budget because they think it's constraining, but it doesn't have to be. You make your budget. You define what your budget looks like. And so it's really boundaries that you're putting in place with your income or you and your partner's income. And it's really the green light that allows you to spend as you have defined in your plan.
Yeah, and I think with budgets too, there's a lot of different trains of thoughts for budgets. I know I've listened to some Dave Ramsey things, and he is strict, strict, strict on his budgets, where it's take everything out in cash, and if that's money's not in that envelope anymore, that's it for the month. And then there's some other trains of thoughts, and I'm probably more on the other side, and it's for me, I like to put together a budget for myself, my wife, and soon to be child. I just want to have a very good like ballpark for what my month to month are. Like I have very specific where I know subscriptions or like my wants are in there. I have my necessities that I have to pay for, and I try staying under that or at it as much as possible. I mean, there's some things that come up month to month that you're a little bit over, but that's just that monthly check of saying, "Oh man, I went over this month. Why did I go over?" And then just try to go on and kind of fix it for the next month or save some here and there.
Yeah, and I think you'd be surprised. At least my wife and I were surprised when we created our budget for the first time. Kind of get a pay raise. Like all of a sudden you realize that hey, you're spending, all this money on eating out, or maybe it's, when you're going to Target, you're picking up a couple extra things that you don't necessarily need, and all of a sudden you create this budget and you really define like how much you want to spend on each category. And hey, I've got an extra, couple to few $100 in aside that now I can beef up the savings or invest more, or maybe you put that towards a date night fund. Whatever it is, it's really up to you. But it's pretty astonishing when you create this budget and all of a sudden you're making more money, even though you actually aren't.
Yep, and I think that's a great point too. I mean, I guess like a little analogy would be without a budget, you never know when you got a hole in your boat. And so if you got a hole in your boat and you don't have an idea about it, your boat's going to sink, and next thing you know, you're underwater. It seems like when you have the budget, you find a way to figure out where that hole is, where that leak is coming in, and you can patch it up and fix it and keep on floating.
And the nice thing too then about the budget is when you have that excess money, you really have the opportunity to beef up your emergency fund. So creating that emergency fund is our number 2 on our list here today, but it's really a really good opportunity to create this fund that you can use when when you need it most.
It's something that you overlook a lot because the first thing you only see is your spending and how much you're making. But the emergency funds have been very important to me. And it's just because you never know what's going to happen. I talked about earlier if hot water heater goes out or you need new tires. Your month to month income and expenses can be fine, but they're just those outliers. So if you don't have anything saved up in your rainy day fund, it causes some trouble. And emergency fund, it doesn't have to be, you probably eventually want to get it close to 6 months of your expenses, but really to start off with, just put, $10, $20, have your first goal is $100 emergency fund. And then once you hit that goal, you move it up to $200. Once you hit that goal, just keep moving it up. And you'll be surprised by having that budget and putting some money off to the side, how fast that emergency fund can fill up.
With really anything personal finance related, like you got to start somewhere. So start small and build from there. But really, to
Hmm.
piggyback a little bit off what Drew was saying, ultimately, your emergency fund, you do want to beef up. And when you think about your personal situation, the size of your emergency fund is really dependent on the stability of your career and your income that you get every month. So, good rule of thumb is if you have a pretty stable job, you can have 3 to 6 months worth of an emergency fund, maybe even closer to the 3 rather than the 6. But if you are in a type of career where maybe you're working off of or living off of commissions, or you're working for yourself and your income fluctuates quite a bit month over month, you might want to
Hmm.
think having an emergency fund from the 6 month and maybe all the way up to even 12 months. Granted, that's quite excessive. I personally don't think you should ever have more than a 9 month emergency fund. That's just because you can make your money work so much better elsewhere. But then, even outside of just the stability of your job, you got to think of what makes you comfortable and what makes you sleep better at night. If it's a 6 month emergency fund, if it's a 12-month emergency fund, great, just have that. Part of this journey is making sure that you are comfortable in your financial situation.
Yep. And it's one of those things when you personally thought you maybe don't need an emergency fund more than, 9 months. And then the thing with that is it's beautiful because once you have that built up, it's there. So you already put money away, you already have it beefed up. And then, that brings to the third point of this top 10 personal finance is limiting debt. So if you have all this extra cash now, you got this emergency fund, you can start tossing all that extra money into your debt. Start putting towards principal and just let all that extra cash snowball into that.
That limit debt is such a big thing because like we briefly mentioned a little bit ago, it's so easy to get yourself wrapped into the debt life. Most people coming out of high school, they go to college and they take out student loans. Then they need a car, so they take out a car loan. And then, maybe it's an engagement ring, and then maybe it's a wedding and house, and it just doesn't ever really stop. And that really adds up over time. I know student loans was a big thing in my household that really weighed us down until we took care of them. But it's something that you have to be super careful of because it's very easy to just look at the monthly payment that the debt is offering and be like, yeah, that fits to my budget. But I think you really need to be asking not how much is it each month, but how much am I paying in total? And I think that's a
Hmm.
really important thing to think through when you're looking for cars or those bigger things that you typically would be taking out debt for.
And even with those debts, and when you're kind of talking earlier too with your typical W-2 job, and you said, "Yep, this payment it fits in perfectly fine." But like we were saying, if it's not stable, something happens in the economy, that payment is no longer that manageable. And I think that's the biggest thing is you just never know what's going to happen. And when you can't manage that debt or you get out of control on that debt, you're going to either start fire sailing everything or you have to figure something just very creative out.
Yeah, and there's definitely different rules or schools of thought, right, around, how much debt is okay and what's
Hmm.
good debt and what's bad debt.
Sure.
And Drew and I will get into that more in future episodes, but I'm pretty much on the side of most debt is really bad unless you are buying a house or potentially starting a business. I just think that those payments can weigh you down so much. Again, back to my vision of what personal finance is, it really doesn't allow you to have choice. And I think
Hmm.
that in and of itself is a reason to really stray away from it. Debt it's very concerning. And if we dive a little bit deeper into our number 4 topic on this list,
Hmm.
it's the credit card conversation. And credit cards, they can be very beneficial in your financial plan, but you really need to be able to use them wisely. As you are probably well aware, credit cards have a very high interest rate on them. They provide convenience and pain, they provide points, but if you get yourself into a situation where you're not making the full payment and all of a sudden you're adding up interest, we're talking, 25%, generally speaking, interest you're going to be charged on something. So it's extremely important if you are using credit cards to make sure that you are paying them off every month and using them wisely and not overspending.
Yep, and I think that paying the credit card off is probably one of the most important things. When they say use credit card wisely, I mean that's huge. You got to keep everything within your normal spending, and if you're not paying that credit card off, that's when you don't realize how much money you're spending in interest. When Kevin's saying 25%, that's about right on. I think mine's 24%, and if I wasn't paying mine off every single month, there would be that leak in the boat. They always have their
Yeah, for
minimum
sure.
payments, and you think you can make that minimum payment, but as your credit card amount keeps going up or as it grows, your interest payment ends up being almost more than your minimum payment. And next thing you know, your credit card's limited out and you don't realize how you got in $10,000 worth of debt.
Yeah, and I think this is something where you need to ask yourself and be self-aware of, are you able to handle a credit card?
Hmm.
Are you able to control your spending so that you can spend it off, pay it off every month? Because it's very like we're saying, it's very easy to buy more than you have in your bank account, and then it's going to snowball. And that is one, it really hurts your financial position. But if you can't make those minimum payments, it's really going to start hurting your credit score. So, really looking at our fifth item on the list here is
Hmm.
monitoring your credit score. Credit score is really important in the financial world, right, Drew?
Yep, it's very important. I think that's another one where you think about Dave Ramsey, and he has very good sound advice, and he doesn't believe in a credit score, but that's more because he thinks everything should be paid in cash, which is works for some people, and that's pretty good. But when you're just starting out, and if you don't have that credit score, it's really hard to get into even an apartment. I mean, I think right now you can't even get cell phones if you don't have a good credit score. Not saying you can't do it without a good credit score, but it definitely makes life more difficult, and there's a lot of roadblocks that come along with having a poor credit score.
Yeah, especially when you're starting to look to buy a house, your first house, your interest rate is going to be tied directly to your credit score, or the amount you have to put down is going to be tied directly to your credit score. So it's very important to make sure that you maintain and increase your credit score over time. It's just so important, especially today where so much of the purchasing and transactions we do are digital, they're through plastic. Your credit score is quite important for all of those different things.
And when overall, when you're thinking your interest rates are connected to your credit score, I mean, if you're having a bad credit score and you decide to get a bad interest rate because of that, you're spending thousands upon thousands of extra dollars for whatever you're planning to purchase. That
Yeah,
won't
for
even be
sure.
yours for a while
Yeah,
until it gets
yeah,
bought.
exactly. Yeah, you're going to be end up costing yourself more in the long run, taking control of your credit score. And it's pretty
Yep.
easy nowadays to monitor it. I mean, a lot of these companies now offer at least once a year free credit checks,
Hmm.
which doesn't impact your credit score. But then even like if your credit cards will offer it in an unlimited amount of checks, your banks will. So it's really easy to check in on it and to make sure that everything looks good. And so Drew, as we move down this list now to number 6,
Hmm.
one of the big things here is when you think about personal finance, you really need to consider your family. When I think about considering your family, it's really your household. So, for myself, I'm married to Hannah. We have 2 kids, and it's really a team effort. And so, how do we make sure that all the income we have coming in is agreed upon between Hannah and myself so that we can move forward in the right direction that we want as a family? I think that's just incredibly important. And it's really gotten us through a lot of financial hardships. So, like I said, we were in a lot of student loan debt coming out of school. Being on that same page on the personal finance side really was allowed us to pay it all off relatively quickly.
There's always another side of it too that you have to think with your finances is if you are single or you do have a spouse or you do have kids, do you want to have protection for when you're gone? Is it going to be a will and making sure your finances that you've been working so hard with yourself and with your spouse that if for some reason you pass, everything's fine. It gets moved on to your next kin or your spouse or whoever it may be. And I think that's one thing that you really have to sit back and I know you don't think you're going to die tomorrow, but it's better to be prepared.
Yeah, and listen, like life insurance, term life insurance is extremely cheap, relatively speaking, especially if you're in your 20s or 30s. Getting a 15-year term, it's probably going to cost you 10 to 20 bucks a month, depending on how you qualify. And so, yeah, Drew, I think that's so important is, you have to have all your foundation covered in the event that something happens to you, specifically if you are a big portion of the income that's coming in every month. So making sure that if something happened to you, everyone around you is going to be a-okay.
And I think that's, you know, a big part of the personal finance.
And then I think the last thing when we think about our family, something to consider is if you do have kids, or maybe you don't have kids and you have nieces and nephews, and they potentially might go to school when they're older. That's something that you can consider to start planning, whether it's looking into different accounts where you can invest and get some tax benefits like a 529 plan. I think this category of considering your family is just so broad, and there's so many things to take into account, especially in your individual situation.
For sure. And even just that comfortability of talking about finances with your family. I mean, that's such a small part. They probably don't even talk about that in these top tens, but being able to just chat with your wife or your kids or the rest of your family just about
Yeah.
finances, not making it weird.
I know for us, back when we were trying to get out of our student loan debt, Hannah and I would talk, every day, if not, at least a few times a week around the income that's coming in or just the expenses and where we're sitting. We talk less so now, now that that's in the rearview mirror. But still, we still talk at least monthly, having dedicated time around talking about our personal finance situation. But I think, looking at the next item on the list here, paying off student loans. That's a big one. And that's a real big issue right now in America. I think the last time I saw, we're at about 1.6 or $7 trillion in student debt within the economy. And so taking account for your student loans and what's your game plan to getting those out of your life?
Those student loans, it's also came into such a weird spot, I think, for kids coming out of high school. I think it's just being told go to college, go to college, go to college. Everybody hears what the best ones are, so they try going to the best one, and they know they can get a student loan, but they just don't understand how much money is going to end up being at the end of your degree or your end of your time in school. So having that understanding before, and even if you didn't, it's just very important that you figure out what those student loans are, where they're at, and really make an effort to get those down as soon as you can, because you can't go bankrupt on the student loans.
Even if you have that's just entering college or is in college in your life, it's okay to talk to them about limiting the amount of loans that they take out. Because I think back of when I was in school, and I didn't really have a personal finance background then, and I took out more than I should have just to live the college life, right? And coming out of school, you get that first job, and you're like, oh, I've got to now pay these back. I wish I didn't take out, that extra 5, 10, whatever grand worth of loans, because now it's going to start biting you in the butt. But as you look to, post college, and that's maybe where you are in your journey right now, it's super important to develop a plan. And I know myself, I'm very adamant that student loans are a huge weight on you, and that getting them out of your life as quickly as you can is a great thing. Even looking further down the line into your personal finance journey, it's so important to start now, to start planning and to saving for retirement. So looking at number 8 on our list, Drew, what do you think about when you look at planning and saving for your retirement?
Yeah, when I look at that, I just think about if you're getting out of college or you didn't go to college, you're just getting out of high school and you're starting that job. And if the company is giving you retirement as part of your benefits, like make sure you can max that thing out as soon as you can. Because when you start making your paychecks and you start seeing all that money, you're gonna be like, oh, I never had this much money in my life. And if you don't put that money away right away, you're going to be thinking, where's all my money going when you decide to put it up later?
Yeah, and you're coming out of school, so you know how to live broke, right? So,
Hmm.
or maybe you're not coming out of school, but you're young and you've never really had that income before. The rule of thumb is 15% of your income goes into retirement. Obviously, that's not feasible for everyone, and if it's
Hmm.
not feasible for you, it's something that you should definitely try to get to, but start somewhere.
Yep.
Most companies provide a match, so definitely at least put in as much of the match as you can. So if your employer offers a 4% of your salary match, hit that 4%. That is 100% guaranteed return. You're doubling your money instantly. Uh, you're not finding that anywhere in the stock market through your retirement plan. So it's a huge benefit if your employer offers it. But then if you're not starting at that 15%, try to increase the percentage of money you're putting into your retirement over time. And so I'm a big fan of half to 1 percentage point increase each and every year. So if you start at 10, maybe then the next year you go to 10 and a half and then 11 and so on until you get up to your 15% over time. But if you can move up quicker, that's great too.
Even if you're working in a job that doesn't have that, or you want to start when you're in high school, I mean, there's a lot of ways to be able to start planning and saving. I mean, it's very easy to go find out and see if you can see like a financial advisor, for example, and just have them talk with you and specialize to your unique situation. If you're, waiting tables and you have a bunch of cash left over, or you don't know where to put some extra money, talk with the financial advisor. They'll figure something out with you, whether it be your own personal 401k or your own liquid mutual funds. And the sooner you start those plannings and saving for the retirement, the better off you are.
That's super important. As we look at number 9 on our list, it kind of goes hand in hand here with number 8. It's maximizing tax breaks. Staying on the retirement topic, there are different accounts that you can leverage to make sure that you're being tax efficient. So that's, your 401ks, your individual retirement accounts, or your IRAs, both traditional and Roth versions of each of those. Those are going to give you different tax breaks. So your traditional accounts, those are going to be pre-tax contributions into the account and into the investment, and then you're going to pay taxes when you pull it out in retirement. Then on the other hand, a Roth is going to be after-tax contributions, and then you'll never be taxed on the growth that you see within the account. And so, really putting both of those types of accounts into your financial plan is really going to pay dividends in the long run.
And like you said, there's just so many different vehicles um, out there. If you are somebody that has these benefits through a company, like even something like an HSA with your health plan. I mean, if you're getting this money that's not getting taxed, I mean, you have that extra money that you're putting down for if you get hurt, or if you need a knee brace, or if you think there's like a massage tool out there that could categorize as a health item, and you didn't have to pay any tax on that money that got put in there. So there's extra money in your pocket that you're not giving to, the government.
More money in your pocket is always a good thing. And then
Hmm.
our last thing, really, to wrap up this list is kind of just need to give yourself a break. Wherever you are in your journey, that's okay. Maybe you're in over your head in debt. Maybe you haven't started for saving for retirement. I think it's important to take a step back and say, I am where I am, and I can always make incremental steps forward towards progress. And you
Hmm.
don't need to stress yourself out because of where you are in your current state.
What was that in Parks and Rec? They said, treat yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of just where it is. I mean, you're just on the money grind day in, day out. And, sometimes you just have to say, you know what? We've been working pretty hard. We have a little bit of extra cash hanging on the side. Maybe we go out for like a nice dinner. Or maybe you go on that vacation you've been wanting to go to, but you couldn't before because you're living paycheck to paycheck. So I just think that's just important. Just make sure that give yourself an incentive. Say, if I can save this much money, if I can hit my goal of my emergency fund, the next thing I'm going to put my goal towards is maybe that vacation I want to go to. Or maybe it's baseball game.
So that rounds out our top 10 personal finance topic list. Drew, after going through this list, what do you think is the big thing that the listener here should take away?
I think there's a lot that we went through there. And, I think there's times where maybe is a little bit hard to follow from what I was thinking and everything. But, you know, I think long story short, what I think people should understand is you need to find a place to start. Because I think that first step forward is always the hardest. And I just think where you should start off with is you just have to take a step back and you just say, all right, I got to take my financial inventory. What cash do I have? What debts do I have? What payments a month do I have? What are my, wants and what are my needs? And really have that all combined in one spot. And then that's where you can start your journey.
Yeah, I think that's so important to lay those things out in front of you and get, have that conversation with yourself or, with someone else if you have someone going on this journey with you. As I think about what the big takeaway is for me when we think about personal finance, it's you need to start with the end in mind. And what I mean by that is you really need to set those long term goals because that's really going to determine what you do in your day to day. And so, if depending on how you want your retirement to look or what type of vacations you want to take throughout your life, child planning, etc., you can know that now and you can be able to create your monthly budget or your annual goals, money goals to really fit into what that long-term vision is. And it's okay for
Yeah.
the long-term vision to change over time, and it obviously does for everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's something that you don't realize you don't do. You never really say, what is it that I want? Or where is it that I want to be? Just randomly when you see things, you might say, I want that or I want this. But it's really important to really take, a night or a week or really set time off to the side before you start this journey and just say, where exactly do I want to be? And then you
Right.
just work your way back.
Yeah, and revisit that, at least annually because it's going to change.
Yep.
And that's definitely okay. For the next segment here in this podcast, at least for today's episode, we really wanted to spend at least a little time talking to you guys about what is some of the financial technology that we use help us both manage our financial lives. And so hopefully this will be a weekly thing. We're not really sure. We're going to see how it goes. Hopefully you'll find value in this segment and be able to take the financial technology that we talk about and implement it into your life or find something that's similar. So today it's all about Mint. And I know, Drew, you're a big Mint user. Do you want to, tell them what it is
Yeah.
all about?
Yeah, for sure. I found Mint, I want to say about 3 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And I found it to simplify my personal finances like tenfold. I was always writing stuff on my notebooks and looking at my credit card statement, look at my bank account statement. It took so long to compile all my information. And with Mint, I was able to connect all of my accounts into Mint and I just have like a summary. I have a dashboard that I can see everything on. I see all my transactions. I can code it to like restaurants, to fuel. I set up actually all my budgets on Mint.
Yeah, that's huge.
When I'm getting close to my budget, I get email alerts and it says, "Hey, you got $10 before you go over on your budget for the month." And then it makes me like, "Oh, geez, I really got to think about that." Um,
Yeah, it adds in
and
that layer of accountability, right?
yeah, and there's sometimes when you see that email, you're like, "Oh, shut up! I don't want, I don't want to hear you." But it's so nice to have that. They give you just alerts on what your monthly subscriptions are. I think it's been with my internet, it goes up $10 a month every year, and if it wasn't for Mint, I would have to go in at the end of the month and I would have to just double check everything. But I get an alert saying, "Hey, this looks like it's more money than it's normally been," and I go take a look, and sure enough, that was the price increase, and then I have to go and call and double check it's correct. So it's very nice to be able to catch items like that. But you can also add in, you know, how much your car's worth as part of your net worth. You can put in your debt so you can constantly see that coming down. It
Oh, that's cool.
categorizes all of your spending in like graphs. shows you your bills and your due dates. And another feature with it was the your goal setting. So we talked about like treating yourself or setting up your emergency fund. You put in your goal for your emergency fund, and it shows you that progress every single week, every single day, every single month. So it's really cool to start seeing things build like visually.
Yeah, it just ultimately makes you accountable on a daily basis. And it's a technology that you don't have to be that hands-on is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. It sounds like there are some things, that you have to finesse with, but once you have things rolling, it's kind of just there and it's easy to look at and it's easy to use.
So yeah, no, I'm a big believer in Mint. I really enjoy it. I'm sure there's other apps out there similar to it, uh, but it's what I've found. It's free to use. They give you some offers to look at home loans, car loans, credit cards, and just some other offers that they put on there too. So it's just like a neat app. And when you're saying it keeps me accountable or helps keep me accountable, it's just nice to. I mean, it's true. It's nice to have that because there's sometimes if you're the ones making the decision, it's it can be easy to talk yourself into going out one more time to eat that month, or it's just fast food one more time this week,
Yeah.
or this month. Yeah, and then for I think to end this episode, I think this last little segment, I hope it can be fun, is we're gonna call it "What Happened in Your Neighborhood This Week," and it's just gonna be a casual talk between Cavan and myself, maybe even you, the listener. So, Cavan, anything good happened in your neighborhood this week?
Yeah. So Hannah and I are super into this Netflix series called Manifest. And if you haven't heard about what Manifest is it's a story about a plane that or it disappears for 5 years and then they come back, but the people on the plane don't actually realize that the time has gone by, but the world has moved on without them. And so it's really the story of how they come back into the world, but then there's bunch of different twists and turns. But the funny part is that we get pretty hooked into binge watching these, but I typically can only make it about an episode and a half, and then I am out cold, and Hannah just gets so mad at me every time because I'm the one too that's like, let's just watch one more, and then I'm snoozing 10 minutes later.
Not me, man. I'm sleeping up till 2, 3 in the morning if I start binge watching. So I got to be very careful when I start watching shows.
I tell you, man, that TV goes on and it's just like a sweet lullaby to me. It can just put me right to sleep. Drew, what's going on in your neighborhood this week?
Well, it's kind of funny. Yesterday we had the new stroller come in for the baby and the car seat, and Jordan, my wife, decided to kind of model it yesterday. So she's putting all these different attachments on it, walking in and out of the kitchen. She's like, for the first one, it's going to be the car seat. And she comes in, trotting out. And then she went back and figured out how to put like the bassinet or whatever in it. And then she comes showing that. My parents came over, just kind of like a little stroller modeling show.
I'm sure it was an excellent show to see.
It was pretty funny. But I think that about wraps up the first episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'd love if you guys could subscribe, like, share. Tell us what you'd want to hear from our episodes in the future. Toss it in the comments, toss it in the reviews. Whatever you guys can do helps us, that's for sure. We'll be out on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and just about every other major platform out there for podcasts. Cavi, if you have anything to add there.
If you could just share it with one other person, if everyone that listens to this shares it to one person, it's going to grow who it's going to reach and hopefully who it's going to provide value to.
All right. Well, with all that said, I think we will see you next week in the neighborhood.